My name is Emily Carter, the youngest of 5 siblings in the Carter family. To most people, having a big family sounds like a blessing, a built-in tribe, a lifelong support system. But for me, it felt more like being the 5th wheel on a wagon I was never invited to ride. My siblings are all older. Leon, the responsible and commanding eldest, Jake, the second brother who always followed Leon's lead, Sophie, my only sister, the picture-perfect bride, and Ryan, just 3 years older than me, but somehow always on a different planet. Then there's me, the afterthought, the bonus child, as my mother once called me when she didn't know I was listening. Growing up in our house meant learning your place early. Leon was the trailblazer, the first to drive, to graduate, to move out. Jake, the peacemaker. Sophie, the golden girl. Ryan, the free spirit. And me? I was the tag-along, tolerated but rarely embraced. I don't remember when exactly I started feeling invisible. Maybe it was when they all started calling me the kid instead of my name. I used to believe that the bond of family was unbreakable, sacred even. That belief began to crack the day I learned I wasn't invited to Leon's wedding. I was 10. I remember sitting on the stairs in my Sunday dress, watching Mom load gift boxes into the car. "Why can't I come?" I asked, my voice small. She smiled tightly. "It's an adults-only wedding, sweetie. You'll understand when you're older." I didn't understand then, and honestly I don't understand now. I was his sister, not just some neighbor's noisy toddler. But I swallowed my disappointment and waved from the window as the whole family left without me. 2 years later, Jake got married. I was 12 and I still wasn't invited. Again, it was child-free. I began to suspect that this wasn't just about wedding etiquette. It felt personal. Felt like I wasn't wanted. But I kept it to myself. A well-behaved child, just like they liked. By the time Sophie announced her engagement, I was 15 and had started to find my voice. I asked her, pleaded really, to make an exception for me. I wasn't a kid anymore. I was a teenager. I could behave. I could help. She sighed, looked uncomfortable. "Emily, I wish I could. But if I invite you, it wouldn't be fair to the other kids in the family. We have to be consistent." "But I'm not like the other kids. I'm your sister." "Exactly," she said and walked away. I remember crying that night, not just because of the rejection, but because of the realization that I meant less to them than I thought. When I protested to my parents, they called me dramatic and grounded me for raising my voice. Ryan got married when I was 17. By then I had stopped asking. I didn't even pretend to care. I sent him a half-hearted congratulations via text and locked myself in my room. My parents called me ungrateful. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was just tired of being the only one expected to smile through the hurt. That brings us to now. I'm 27, engaged to Lucas, the most loving, grounding presence I've ever known. When we started planning our wedding, one thing was clear to me from the start. My siblings weren't invited. Not Leon, not Jake, not Sophie, not Ryan. Not even my parents. Some people might say that's petty, but I don't see it that way. To me, it's justice. A reclaiming of the dignity they spent years shaving off me in little quiet ways. When the invitations went out and none of them received theirs, the questions started. First, it was a subtle comment from Sophie in the family group chat. "Hey maybe there was a mix-up with the mail?" Then Jake got more direct. "Why didn't I get an invite? Did we do something wrong?" I read the messages. And I ignored them. I wasn't ready to give them the satisfaction of a reply. The next day my mother called. As soon as I picked up, she launched in. "Emily Carter, what is the meaning of this? You didn't invite your siblings to your own wedding? Are you out of your mind?" I took a deep breath. "No, Mom. I'm very much in my mind. They didn't invite me to theirs. I'm just returning the courtesy." There was a pause. A long one. Then the explosion. "Is this Lucas's idea? Has he poisoned you against your own family?" I almost laughed. Of course she couldn't believe I had made this decision on my own. Of course someone else had to be the villain. "This isn't about him," I said. "It's about me. It's about the little girl who begged to be part of the most important days in her siblings' lives, and was told she didn't belong. This is me drawing a line." She hung up on me. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. The texts kept coming. My brothers sent me guilt-laced essays. Sophie played the emotional card. "My kids were so excited to see you get married. They wanted to be flower girls. It was almost funny. The same people who didn't think a 15-year-old sister deserved a seat at their wedding were now offended that their children weren't invited to mine. That's the thing about people who ignore your pain. They never think it counts until it inconveniences them. This was just the beginning of my stand. A decision that would ripple through every layer of my past, present, and future. But I had no idea just how far the impact would go. Because soon the past would come back to haunt me in ways I never expected. In old letters, torn photos, and secrets hidden in family silence. But before all of that unraveled, I had a wedding to plan, my own. The one day that would belong entirely to me. Planning the wedding with Lucas was like finally getting to breathe after holding it in for years. We sat at the kitchen table for hours sipping tea, sketching ideas, talking about the music, the food, the vibe. It wasn't going to be grand or glamorous, but it was going to be ours. Intimate. Honest. Full of warmth. Lucas never once asked about inviting my family. He knew the story. He knew the pain. He only said, "Whoever makes you feel loved, that's who should be there." We chose an old garden venue outside the city. Wildflowers, string lights, soft jazz in the background. The kind of wedding where you could wear your shoes or kick them off and dance barefoot. Where the love in the air wasn't formal or forced, it was felt. On the day of the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror in my simple ivory dress. No train, no veil. Just me, the woman I had become. I didn't think about who wasn't there. I didn't need to. Instead, I thought about the people who were. My best friend Tasha, who held my hand through every meltdown. My old high school English teacher who wrote the most heartfelt toast. And Lucas's grandmother who squeezed my hands and said, "You are so deeply loved, Emily." When I walked down the aisle, there were no whispers of judgment. No eyes scanning for mistakes. Just smiles. Lucas stood at the end beaming, tears in his eyes. As I took his hands, I realized, this is what family feels like. After the ceremony, while guests laughed and danced, I caught a glimpse of my phone buzzing. Messages. Missed calls. I turned it over. But that peace didn't last long. 2 days later, Sophie posted a cryptic comment on a mutual friend's Facebook post with a photo from the wedding. Interesting decor choice. Then Jake added, "Wish someone had asked for help. Could have made it look a little less like a backyard barbecue." I hadn't posted any photos. Neither had Lucas. Somehow they got them anyway. I felt heat rush to my face. Who had shared them? Who had breached that small circle of trust? I would soon find out. And it would hurt more than I expected. It was 3 days after the wedding when I decided to clean out the guest room closet. Maybe it was the leftover adrenaline from the event, or maybe I just needed something to keep my hands busy, while my head spun from Sophie's petty comments and Jake's smug jabs. The closet hadn't been touched in months. Mostly storage boxes, old photo albums, and a few things from my childhood that I never had the heart to throw out. I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by dust bunnies and cardboard memories. That's when I found it. A shoebox marked Emily 8th grade in faded blue Sharpie. Inside, glittery birthday cards, an old music medal from middle school choir, folded notes from Tasha, and right at the bottom, a letter. It was neatly folded on cream stationery. My name was on the front, written in Sophie's handwriting.
No envelope. No stamp.
Just my name and a truth that was never meant to reach me. I hesitated for a second, heart thudding for reasons I couldn't quite name. Then I opened it. "Emily, I don't know if I'll ever give this to you. I hope I can, but knowing Mom, probably not. I wanted you at my wedding. I swear I did. You were 15, not some random cousin's toddler. But Mom said it would set a precedent and make things complicated." I tried to push back, but you know how she is. She made it clear it wasn't an option. And I guess I let it go. That doesn't mean I didn't think of you. When I picked my dress, when I looked at the empty chairs, one of them should have had your name on it.
I'm sorry, Em.
For not fighting harder. Love, Sophie. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. My hands were shaking by the end. Part of me wanted to tear it up and throw it across the room. Another part just sat there, stunned and quiet, feeling something crack open. Not anger. Not relief. Just confusion. She had wanted me there. But she hadn't fought hard enough. And in our family, not fighting always looked a lot like complicity. I held the letter in my lap, staring at it like it might suddenly say something more. Like it might answer the question still screaming in my chest. Why hadn't she given it to me back then? Why now, why ever? Did no one have the courage to stand up for me? I thought back to the wedding. To how Sophie tried to guilt me with her own children, as if I owed them something she never gave me. To the way she'd weaponized sentimentality and nostalgia, hoping I'd forget all the small betrayals that led me here. But the truth is I hadn't forgotten. And I wasn't sure I was ready to forgive either. Lucas walked in and found me sitting on the floor, the letter in my hand. He knelt beside me without a word, just placed his hand gently over mine. She wanted to invite me, I whispered, holding up the paper. Sophie. She wrote this years ago. He read it, eyes scanning slowly, his brow furrowing. Well, he said after a moment, that explains a lot. But it doesn't change what they all chose to do. I know, I said. But it still hurts. Of course it does, he replied softly. Because you loved them. You trusted them. I nodded, blinking hard. It's like, I always thought I was completely unwanted, I murmured. But maybe it's worse to know that someone did want me there, and still didn't fight for me. Lucas didn't try to rationalize it. He just pulled me into his arms and let me cry. I didn't know what I was mourning more, the absence or the almost presence, the invitation that never came, or the silent regret left buried in a closet for over a decade. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that line. She made it clear it wasn't an option. Why? Why was I always the exception, the inconvenience? And that's when something else hit me. A memory I hadn't thought about in years. At Sophie's bridal shower, Mom had snapped at one of the aunts for bringing her toddler. She said, "Weddings are for grown-ups. Children don't belong at events like these." But I wasn't a child, was I? I was a teenager, a sister. And suddenly I wondered, was it really about age at all? Or was there something else? The next morning I dug deeper. Into photo albums. Into old drawers. Into the corners of memories I'd once tucked away to protect myself. And I found more questions than answers. A photo torn in half. My half missing. A message from a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. If you ever want to talk about why things were always so different for you, I'm here. That sentence sat with me like a stone in my chest. Different. I had always felt it. And maybe I wasn't imagining it. But those questions would have to wait. For now, all I could do was fold Sophie's letter and place it back in the box. Not to forget. Not to forgive. But to remember. To remember that silence is still a choice. And that sometimes it's not the absence of love that hurts most. It's the love that came too late, too quiet, and too easy to ignore. After Sophie's letter, something inside me refused to settle. I told myself to let it go, that the wedding was behind me, that the letter was a ghost from a past I'd already buried. But late at night, when the house was quiet and Lucas had drifted to sleep beside me, my mind would race. There was something unfinished. Something I hadn't yet uncovered. And it kept pulling me back to the past like an undertow. One rainy Sunday I went back to Mom and Dad's old storage bin in the garage, the one they'd dropped off a year ago when they were downsizing. I hadn't looked through it since. It smelled faintly of mothballs and dust, just like the attic I used to sneak into as a kid. I opened the lid. On top, my baby blanket, a cracked snow globe, a stack of school art projects yellowed at the edges. At the very bottom, wrapped in a worn manila folder, was the family photo album I remembered from my childhood. The one Mom used to keep in the living room, proudly displayed for guests. I flipped it open page by page and there it was. A picture from Sophie's high school graduation. Everyone was in it: Mom, Dad, Leon, Jake, Ryan, Sophie in her cap and gown, and me. I remembered that day clearly. I wore a pale yellow dress, the one I begged Mom to buy. But the version in the album was different. The photo had been torn in half and taped back together. Except it was missing someone. Me. I stared at the image. My place was gone. All that remained was a jagged tear along the edge, the faint outline of where my body should have been, now just a slice of background grass. I felt cold all over. Why would anyone, why would my mother, rip me out of a photo and then pretend like nothing happened? I stood there for several minutes, heart pounding, memories flashing behind my eyes like headlights in a storm. All those years. All the times I felt like I didn't belong. All the subtle exclusions. And now here was a physical confirmation. Proof that someone had tried to erase me from the story. I took the album back inside and laid it on the kitchen table. Lucas came in, drying his hands on a towel, and stopped short when he saw my face. What happened? I turned the album toward him, opened it to the torn photo. He studied it. Where are you? That's the point, I said, my voice cracking. I was there. But someone tore me out. Lucas sat down slowly. Emily. I don't even know what's worse anymore, I said. The silence? The pretending? Or the moments like this, where I find out I was included, only to be cut out afterward. He reached for my hand. Do you want to ask them about it? I shook my head.
No.
I don't need their explanations. I just want to know why it keeps hurting. We sat there for a while not speaking. And then my phone buzzed. A notification. A tag in a photo I hadn't seen. It was from Megan. Of course it was. She'd posted a throwback to my wedding day. A photo of me and Lucas on the dance floor. Golden light pouring through the trees. It was beautiful. Intimate. Personal. And completely unauthorized. My stomach dropped as I opened the comments section. Sophie had commented. Jake had commented. Even my mother had added a passive-aggressive heart emoji. I hadn't given that photo to Megan. I'd only sent it to a few close friends. The ones I trusted. I called her immediately. Hey Em. She answered cheerfully like nothing was wrong. Megan, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Why did you post that photo? She paused. Oh, I thought it was such a great shot. You and Lucas looked amazing. I wanted to share it. That picture was private, I said. I didn't give you permission to post it. Oh, come on, don't be like that, she said lightly. It's not a big deal. Your family was curious. They wanted to see how the wedding turned out. I froze. Wait, you sent it to them. There was silence on the other end. Megan. She sighed. Emily, they're your family. They were hurt you didn't invite them. I thought if they saw the pictures, maybe it would bring some peace. I was just trying to help. I felt something snap. Help, I said, nearly whispering. You thought sending pictures of the one day I explicitly asked them not to be part of would bring peace? I didn't think you'd mind, she mumbled. I swallowed hard. Then you never knew me, Megan. And you certainly didn't respect me. There was another pause. Are you really going to end a friendship over a photo? No, I said coldly. I'm ending it because you chose them over me. You chose their comfort over my boundaries. And that tells me exactly where your loyalty lies. I hung up before she could say anything else. That night I sat with Lucas on the couch, the silence heavy between us. He wrapped his arm around me and pulled me close. Do you regret cutting them off? He asked gently. I thought for a long moment. No, I said. But I regret the lies I told myself for years. That if I was just more patient, more understanding, more forgiving, maybe one day they'd see me. Maybe one day I'd matter. Lucas kissed the top of my head. You matter now. To me. To the people who show up for you. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe without the weight of being torn between past and present. But deep down I knew the storm wasn't over yet. Because betrayal never walks alone. It brings secrets. And secrets have a way of demanding to be seen. It was a Thursday morning when she came. I should have known something was coming. There'd been too much quiet after the blow-up with Megan. The wedding photos had already made their way into the family group chat. My siblings had stopped tagging me in passive-aggressive posts, and even Sophie had gone unusually silent. Then without warning I heard a knock at the door. 3 short raps.
Familiar.
Sharp. Rhythmic. My mother's knock. Lucas was at work. I was alone. I stood still in the hallway for a moment, pretending maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was a delivery or a neighbor. But then came her voice. Emily. Open the door. We need to talk. I didn't move. She knocked again, harder this time. Emily. I know you're in there. I considered not answering. I'd ignored calls, texts, even a voicemail from my father that ended with a heavy, disappointed sigh. But something about her being there in person, on my doorstep uninvited, made the air in my chest tighten. I opened the door just a crack. She looked exactly the same and somehow completely different. Hair perfectly styled, lipstick a little too bold for a weekday. But her eyes, those steel blue eyes that used to narrow when I misbehaved, were wide with something else now. Frustration? Panic? Desperation? "I'm not here to fight," she said quickly. "I just want to talk." "I didn't ask for a conversation," I replied, keeping the door halfway closed. She exhaled, clearly irritated. "Emily, don't be childish." There it was. The tone. That subtle scold hidden in a sentence meant to sound reasonable. "I'm not being childish," I said. "I'm protecting my peace." She blinked. "Peace? You call this peace? Cutting your family out of your life? Refusing to let your own mother attend your wedding?" "I wasn't invited to yours," I said flatly. She scoffed. "That was different. You were a child."
No, isnapat.
"I was your daughter." She flinched, and for a moment I thought she might cry. But she didn't. Instead, her expression hardened. "Your father and I raised you, gave you everything. And this is how you repay us? By shutting us out like strangers." "You raised me with conditions," I said. "With expectations. With rules about when I was allowed to exist and when I needed to disappear." "That's not fair," she said. "We did our best." "Then your best wasn't enough," I said louder now. "Because for years I felt like a ghost in my own family. I watched my siblings live these beautiful public milestones, weddings, graduations, anniversaries, and I stood on the sidelines like I didn't belong." Her jaw clenched. "We never meant to exclude you." "But you did." "Over and over," I said, stepping into the doorway now. "And when I finally decided to stop accepting scraps of affection, you called me selfish. Ungrateful." "Because you are ungrateful," she snapped. "You had food, clothes, a home." "I didn't need more food, Mom. I needed love. I needed a seat at the table. I needed to feel like I mattered." The silence that followed was heavy, brittle, like glass just before it shatters. She looked away. "You're exaggerating." "I'm not," I said, breathing hard. "You just don't want to see it." Another pause. Then softly she said, "I heard you're pregnant." The words dropped between us like ice cubes in a glass. Sharp. Sudden. Cold. I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "Emily, no matter what's happened, you're my daughter. And that baby is part of us too. Don't shut us out of their life. Don't make the same mistake twice."
Is det här stunt?
"You think I'm the one repeating mistakes?" I said. "You show up here uninvited, pretending you didn't help create this rift. And now you want access to my child?" "I just want to be there," she said. "To know my grandchild. You may hate me, but the baby didn't do anything." I took a deep breath. "You're right," I said. "The baby didn't do anything. And that's exactly why I won't let them be pulled into this toxic cycle. I won't let them grow up wondering why grandma loves some cousins more than others, or why mommy cries after every phone call with her family." She looked shocked, hurt, but not surprised. I lowered my voice. "I'm building something different, something healthier. If you want to be part of that, it starts with acknowledging what happened."
No excuses. No justifications.
Just the truth. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "I didn't think so," I said, and began to close the door. "Emily," she called out, voice trembling. "You'll regret this." I paused. "No," I said. "I regret not standing up for myself sooner." Then I closed the door and locked it. That night I sat on the couch, wrapped in Lucas's hoodie, staring at the torn photo album on the table. My stomach felt hollow, but my chest, my heart, felt solid. Lucas returned home and immediately knew something had happened. I told him every word. When I finished, he looked at me quietly and said, "You were brave." "I didn't feel brave," I whispered. "I felt exhausted." "Bravery is exhausting," he said, kissing my temple. "But it's also freedom." And maybe he was right. Maybe for the first time I wasn't being cruel. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't being the problem. I was just being honest. And in that honesty, I had finally taken back something I never thought I'd have: control over my own story. 2 weeks passed. The air felt different. Not lighter exactly, but clearer. Like the aftermath of a storm when the sky is scrubbed raw and honest. I hadn't spoken to my mother since she stood on my doorstep.
No surprise texts. No apologies.
No apologies from anyone, in fact. The silence from my family was complete, and for the first time in my life I didn't rush to fill it. Instead I turned inward, toward my home, toward Lucas, toward something new. It started with a flutter, a strange sensation low in my belly, like the wings of something small and unsure. I was late, but I'd been late before. I chalked it up to stress. God knew I'd had enough of that lately. But after the second week, Lucas noticed. "You okay?" he asked, leaning against the counter, watching me sip ginger tea instead of coffee. I hesitated, then nodded. "Just tired." He raised an eyebrow. "Tired or pregnant tired?" I laughed, but something in me froze. He wasn't joking. And neither was my body. The next morning I took the test. Positive. 2 lines. Bold. Undeniable. Life, quiet, powerful, already growing inside me. I stood in the bathroom, hand over my mouth, staring at the result. My knees felt weak. My heart raced. Not from fear, but from the weight of something bigger than both fear and excitement. Possibility. Lucas found me a few minutes later, still holding the test like it might vanish if I blinked. He didn't say anything at first. Just wrapped his arms around me and kissed my forehead. "We're going to be okay," he whispered. I nodded, and this time I believed him. Over the following days I walked differently, sat differently, thought differently. I found myself standing longer in the nursery section at Target, even though we weren't buying anything yet. I imagined colors, names, lullabies. I imagined what it would feel like to hold a tiny hand that trusted me completely. I also imagined what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't shame them for asking questions. I wouldn't make them feel invisible at the table. I wouldn't let them grow up thinking love had conditions. This baby would never doubt that they belonged. But as joy crept in, so did the questions. Should I tell my family? Should I give them a chance to know the child I had just begun to love? Sophie once said her kids were excited to see me in a wedding dress. Would they want to be cousins to my baby? Would my father want to rock his grandchild to sleep? Would my mother cry the first time she saw their face? And more importantly, did any of that matter? One afternoon, I sat on the edge of the bed, hand on my stomach, and whispered aloud what I already knew deep down. You are not a bridge for other people's redemption. This child was not a reason for anyone to be let back in. They were not a bargaining chip. Not a second chance wrapped in a crib. They were their own story. And I had a responsibility to protect it. A week later, a card arrived in the mail. No return address. No message inside. Just a baby-themed congratulations card. And a single pressed daisy. I knew who it was from. Sophie. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just placed the card on a shelf and walked away. Because gestures, however well-meaning, were not the same as change. And change, I had learned, only counts when it costs you something. Lucas and I sat on the couch that evening, scrolling through name lists. He pointed at 1 June. Too soft, I said. Exactly why I like it, he smiled. Then he looked at me serious. Do you think they'll try to come back? I think they already are, I said. In cards. In whispers. In guilt. He took my hand. What do you want? I thought for a moment, longer than I expected. I want peace, I said. Real peace. Not the quiet that comes from avoidance, but the kind that grows when you stop trying to please people who only love a version of you that doesn't exist. He nodded. Then that's what we build. For you. For them. I looked down at my belly. Still flat but no longer empty. For the first time in my life, I was building something no one else could take away. And I wouldn't let the past steal this from me. Not again. It came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was in bed, half asleep, the room dim and silent except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand and out of habit I reached for it. One new message. Instagram DM. From an account I didn't recognize at Rachel_it_81. I tapped it open, expecting spam or a random follower request. But what I found was a name I hadn't seen in years. Rachel Wyatt. My mom's second cousin. We'd met once, maybe twice, when I was a child. She lived out west, only visited for family funerals. The kind of relative that floats on the periphery of memory. Vaguely familiar but not fully real. But the message she sent felt real. Too real. Emily, I know this is strange and I understand if you ignore me, but I've been watching things from a distance, and I think it's time someone said something. There's a reason why things have always been different for you in the family. A reason no one talks about. You deserve to know. If you want the truth, message me back. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. My hand tightened instinctively over my belly. What the hell? I whispered. Lucas stirred beside me. You okay? I hesitated. I just got a weird message. He sat up halfway. Who from? A cousin. Well, kind of. Rachel Wyatt. On my mom's side. Lucas blinked. Do you know her? Barely, I said. But the message, she said there's a reason I've always been treated differently. That I deserve to know. Lucas was fully awake now. Do you want to reply? I looked at the screen again. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Yes. No. God, I wasn't sure. But some part of me, some quiet, curious part, needed the answer. So I typed, what are you talking about? She replied almost instantly. I was close to your Aunt Marilyn before she passed. She told me things that no one else wanted to deal with. Emily, I think you should know that there's a very real possibility your dad may not be your biological father. My stomach turned. I read the sentence again. And again. It didn't compute. It didn't fit. What is it? Lucas asked, concern rising in his voice. I showed him the phone. He read the message slowly. Whoa. I nodded numbly. This has to be a mistake, I murmured. My dad, he raised me. I look like him. Don't I? Lucas was quiet. And that silence said more than words could. I messaged back, why do you think that? Rachel responded. There were rumors. Quiet ones. Your mom had a relationship before she met your dad. An affair even after she married him. Marilyn knew. She saw the letters. Heard the fights. But no one ever said anything officially. All I know is, you were born after a very difficult year in their marriage. Your mom stopped bringing you to family reunions for a while. When she did, people whispered behind your back. That one's different. It wasn't your fault. But you were always made to feel separate. Because you might have been. I sat still for a long time. Not angry. Not even shocked. Just hello. Like someone had reached inside me and turned a knob to mute. Because deep down I realized I'd always known. Maybe not consciously. But somewhere beneath all the birthday rejections, the excluded events, the polite distance in my father's voice, I had felt it. Fracture. Invisible. Undeniable. I thought of that photo, torn, taped, edited. My image removed. I thought of my mother's face when I told her she wasn't welcome at the wedding. The way she flinched but never fought back. Did she know I knew? Or did she assume I never would? Lucas put a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to figure this out tonight. I nodded, but I was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Was it worth confirming? A DNA test? A confrontation? Would it change anything? My father and I already barely spoke. The last time he looked me in the eye with warmth was years ago. He called me kiddo. But it always felt like a placeholder. Like he didn't know what else to call me. Was that why? Was I not his? And if I wasn't, what did that make me? I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and stared at my reflection like I was trying to see someone else underneath my own skin. I thought of the child growing inside me. And something strange happened. I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Because whether or not my blood matched the man I called Dad, I was still me. Still whole. Still standing. And this baby, they would never have to wonder where they belonged. Because they belonged with me. Always. 3 days after the message from Rachel, I received flowers. No note. No card. Just a small bouquet of white daisies, hand-delivered and left at my doorstep. I stood there barefoot in the morning light, rope tied loosely around my belly that was just beginning to swell, and stared down at them for a long moment. Lucas came to the door behind me. Someone sending secret admirers to a pregnant woman? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I recognized the flower. When I was 8, I had a small patch of daisies in our backyard. I used to pick them and press them between pages of my sketchbooks, pretending I was making art. Sophie was the only one who ever noticed. One afternoon she sat beside me under the tree and said, You like the quiet things, Em. I like that about you. That was the only time I remember her saying she liked anything about me. And now, more than 15 years later, white daisies. I brought the bouquet inside, set it gently in a vase on the kitchen table. Still no name. No message. Just that silent, unassuming gesture. One that said, I remember. Lucas watched me, his expression unreadable. Do you want to reach out to her? I shook my head. It wasn't anger holding me back. It wasn't even pride. It was caution. A quiet knowing that sometimes apologies are not invitations, and forgiveness isn't always a reunion. I appreciated the flowers. I really did. But they didn't erase the years. The silences. The looking away. The choice to remain comfortable while I sat on the outside. I ran a finger along one of the petals. It trembled slightly under my touch, as if it too were unsure of what it meant to be here. Maybe Sophie hadn't known how to say the words. Maybe this was the only language she could offer. Or maybe it was guilt. And maybe it didn't matter. Because the truth was I wasn't waiting for them anymore. Not for the words. Not for the grand gesture. Not even for understanding. What I needed I had already begun building within myself, within Lucas, within the small life now growing inside me. Still I kept the daisies. Because even the smallest apology deserves a place to rest. And maybe, just maybe, there was still a version of Sophie who had once meant to love me. A version she buried under years of obedience and silence. This didn't change the past. But it softened the edge of it. It wasn't a dramatic ending. There was no final confrontation. No grand apology. No cinematic reconciliation where my family showed up in the rain holding signs and promises. Life, I've learned, doesn't always offer those neat little bows. But what it did offer me, what I finally gave myself, was peace. Came in small moments. The quiet ones. Like the soft hum of the washing machine as Lucas folded tiny newborn clothes next to me. Like the way sunlight filtered through the nursery curtains, dancing across the walls we painted ourselves. Like the gentle rhythm of my baby's heartbeat during checkups. A sound that felt more like home than any place or person ever had. I didn't reach back out to Sophie. I didn't follow up with Rachel. I didn't confront my mother or my father with DNA kits or accusations. I didn't need to. Because peace doesn't always require answers. Sometimes it just requires release. I chose to stop carrying what wasn't mine. The shame. The confusion. The longing. I let go of the versions of my family I had created in my mind, the ones I kept waiting for, the ones I kept hoping would finally say, we see you. We love you. They never did. And I stopped needing them to. Instead, I chose the people who had already shown up. Tasha, who came to every prenatal class with a bag of snacks and terrible jokes. Lucas's mom, who knitted a blanket for the baby and kissed my cheek every time she left. Lucas, who whispered to my belly at night like he was already in love with someone he hadn't met. These were my people now. This was my family. One day when my child is old enough to ask, "Where's Grandma?" or "Why don't we see your brothers and sister?" I'll tell them the truth. Not the bitter truth, but the honest one. That sometimes family is complicated. That love should never be something you have to earn. That silence can be louder than words. That it's okay to choose peace over blood when blood has never felt safe. And that their mama had to walk through fire before she ever learned to build a home from warmth instead of obligation. On the morning my daughter was born, yes daughter, the sky outside was pale pink. It was quiet in the delivery room. Calm. She arrived small, perfect, and loud. She didn't cry at first. She roared. Lucas laughed through tears and said, "That's definitely your child." When they placed her on my chest, I whispered her name into the space between us like a promise. Mara June Carter. Mara for strength. June for softness. Carter for me. Not them. As I held her close, skin to skin, heart to heart, I felt something shift permanently. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to belong. I did belong. To her. To this moment. To myself. Months later, a letter came in the mail. No return address. Just handwriting I recognized, my mother's. I didn't open it. I slid it into a drawer, beneath birth certificates and baby keepsakes, and let it rest there. Not out of resentment, but out of choice. Because closure, I've come to learn, isn't something they give you. It's something you give yourself. And I had already found mine.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for updates on new videos. See you next time.